I got a comment yesterday after the presentation that they took it as negative because we talked about all these bad things that happened last fall. So unfortunately, we tried to prepare. We talked about it, last year's road shows, trying to get everybody ready. Okay. And still got us. So fortunately, maybe some of you guys in this part of the Indiana didn't have it as bad as other locations, but we'll share our experiences here on prevention, what we've learned in the past year with research, cleanup, mitigation of production flows, all the different areas that we learned in the past year. Certainly today we know that there are currently 3 different variants of the PED virus circulating in our population. The key one is the Chinese sequence, but there's been a couple other variants that have come out of that. As the USDA went back and looked at the development of what happened in the initial outbreak, they learned that the index case started in Ohio a couple weeks, 2 weeks ahead of the other cases that were identified in Indiana, Colorado, and Iowa. And then at the time of the initial announcement, there was 4 cases in Iowa. So, but of those initial breaks, they were 99% similar on virus sequencing. So it was telling us that they all came from the same location, but we really still today don't know how the virus got here or how it was moved around. But just in a period of a little over a month, it went from these initial locations to 74 different premises in 8 states. So the virus was moving quickly, and we were trying to get prepared last year and still underestimated the outcome, I think. What we have learned since then, too, is that this coronavirus has been found in bats in Asia, in China. And so somehow the thinking is today that virus made a species jump from the bat population into hogs and then subsequently was causing problems there and then got over here to the U.S. And then, too, a lot of you have heard about the Delta coronavirus. That one came in later. When we initially saw that virus, we were thinking that maybe it came in with the PED at the same time. We just didn't recognize it. The tests weren't developed, the PCR tests weren't developed until later on. But USDA went back again this past summer and looked at cases from 2010 all the way forward and did not find any coronavirus in any submissions at diagnostic labs until the fall of 2013. So there's another virus that made it into our population here. It is an avian virus. It's different than the PED. And so that's kind of where the situation, and it doesn't seem to be circulating as bad today as it was earlier. This is a graph that is put out every week that gives you an indication, comes from the USDA, of the number of positive cases that are submitted to the diagnostic labs. It's been required now from USDA that we report all positive cases and then develop a herd plan on eliminating the virus. And so this tracking is continued. It actually started right away in the initial breaks, and you can kind of see the little blurb we had in the spring. And in our time frame of these meetings, it was building a little bit. We were optimistic that it wouldn't get so bad, but truly blew up. And so the experience we had through the spring was really difficult. So we're kind of continuing to monitor where we're at today. We're not as low as we were a year ago, but kind of watching these on a weekly basis to see what's going to happen this fall. That's the big unknown, is that we don't think it'll be as bad as last year because we've got a partially immune population, but it still could go. And we've had a few herds that were exposed early on, ran through the spring, put in negative animals, and things were looking good, and then broke again. And so that's our fear, is that this will circulate again. So we're taking extra precautions, as Todd mentioned, and we'll kind of go through those. I think certainly from the multiplication side, our goal is elimination, and we've been quite successful in our multipliers. Every one that broke, we've been able to get it cleaned up, and they're back negative today. But in some commercial systems, they may feel they're in a bad location, they're too big, they don't want to try to do the elimination part, so they're going to try to run with a stable, exposed gilt population. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. No matter which one you choose, these are some key points that are essential to be successful in whichever plan you want to choose. So the basics are the whole herd exposure. Our health assurance group we've worked together to create an elimination document. So if anybody would like to have that as reference material, certainly we're happy to supply that to you. But we've learned as we went through the spring, as things were going on, it was a combination effort with our local herd veterinarians, health assurance group, our tech service production people. We pulled everybody in to try to help rally the troops and get these herds under control as far as getting the virus eliminated. So the key part is whole herd exposure, and that is usually done with oral exposure with feedback. GI tracts are the common method and still used today. We have adjusted the number of intestinal tracts per sow, some things like that as we learn more. We started out using the TGE protocols that we'd used in years past, but with the PED virus, there's so much more virus being shed in the environment that there's just a lot more there. So it doesn't take the same ratios that we used before, but certainly using GI tracts. And then two, people were successful in just collecting diarrhea from acutely affected pigs, just catching that, diluting it out in a pump sprayer, and then inoculating the herd with that. And that actually was quite effective. And part of the goal that we learned too is to do it with the oral, with the sprayers, you're able to contain the virus, not spread it around in the environment so much. Because part of the problem with the cleanup is that the environment, the buildings, the rooms, everything is seeded down with this virus, and it's very resistant in the environment. So part of this process of cleaning up is eliminating the virus from the environment. So the sprayers have worked really well of just going down the line, either spraying it on their nose or in their mouth. And then in pen settings, be it your gilts or if you're in pen gestation, it works really well to just go through the pens, spray the sows or gilts, and then mark them so you know you've got everybody covered. But our goal has been to focus on trying to get good exposure and then mark the cards, mark the sow cards, so that you know who's been sick, whether they're off feed or diarrhea or whatever. But our focus early on was to get 90% clinical signs. And then what we were doing is we do one whole herd initial exposure, which includes all the gilts, everything that you can get in the site, to get them exposed at the same time. And then we would repeat every other day for up to 7 to 10 days for animals that did not show clinical signs. So that was the method of exposure that we gave. Then from the farrowing house side of it, then the management is anything that's 10 to 14 days of age, wean them and get them off site. Because once you get them off milk, out of the farm, they'll actually do quite well. They'll go through a little bit of scours, they'll recover and go on. There may be some growth rate disadvantages, but at least they're live pigs. If they're less than that, anything that's 10 days less, I mean, some people were able to handle it down to 7 days, but you've got to really be prepared for those younger pigs, have a good environment, because they're going to take more care than the 10 to 14 day old. But any of the pigs with PED, any pigs less than 10 days or left in the farrowing rooms should actually be euthanized because they're not going to survive anyway. So it's the humane thing to do. With Delta Corona, that virus is not as virulent, and so I would say work with your herd veterinarian, look at what your effects are from pre-weaning mortality and stuff, and then make a decision. Some of the cases we had with Delta Corona was actually only a 5% increase in pre-weaning mortality. Probably on average, it's about 50% increase, 50% mortality in those younger pigs. So, you know, that one's a little bit more variable. But part of it is too, is that as you start back up, don't bother processing pigs until you've got them surviving 7 days out. Because there's no sense in handling them. If you're handling them and trying to work with those pigs, you're actually going to be spreading the virus around. So our comments and what we learned was just leave them alone for 7 days. They'll actually do quite well. And if you start surviving out to that point, then you can go ahead and start giving them iron, process, and do whatever you do. The key point here with this, and the same as is true with the PRRS outbreak, is what we call the McRebel program, where there's no pig movements. Whatever's born to a sow, those pigs stay with that sow. No moving it around, because that's how you're going to spread the virus. There'll be some sows that are shedding more than others, and pigs get exposed. And so a really strict McRebel protocol. And then we learned as we went along too is to restrict your farrowing people movement. because we would be carrying that virus just within the farrowing rooms from the youngest to the oldest. And so your day one care people, keep them separate. Don't have them going into the older rooms, go to the older rooms and come back. If you do have to do that, then set something up to where you can have like a Danish system where you could change coveralls and use alcohol in your hands, and use disposable gloves. But this virus is so prevalent that it's just easy to carry it around. So, and then too, along with that same line is then keep everybody stay out of the crates. You know, use those little catchers to catch your pigs when you do start processing, but don't be getting in those crates where the diarrhea is at, because you're just going to spread it around. And then a key point too is all in, all out. You get into these big farrowing rooms, you got a lot of crates, you try to do a partial wash up, you're spraying, washing, disinfecting, and you're just aerosolizing that virus into the younger pigs in the room. So it's really critical to do all in, all out. Be very strict on that. And then along with it then is use detergent. You want to try to get rid of the biofilm. With the diarrhea and everything, there's a lot of mucus and stuff in those crates. So use a detergent, disinfect, and then allow it to dry. We want to make a break in those rooms to give those pigs the best chance. And then along the same lines, then there's no movement between rooms. Every room is a distinct group. And then when you start processing, then use gloves and change needles from every litter. You're trying to do everything you can to keep from spreading the virus around. And then two, as every movement that happens, whether you're loading sows, weaning pigs, after every movement, wash, disinfect the hallways. Here again, and then segregate employees, keep your gestation people in their area, not have them come in and help process or do whatever in farrowing, because they potentially can carry it in there too. And then another thing is as you start having more pigs, don't hold any pigs back from a weaning. You know, don't worry about, take the cost of weaning and moving, getting them off site. You don't want any pigs hanging around, because as the pigs are surviving, there's less diarrhea in the rooms, but there's still a few pigs that have got the virus, and they'll start shedding, and then they'll spread it to the others. And so you'll just perpetuate the survival in the rooms if you hold pigs back. So, and the same would be true, we learned it on our side where we have an internal GDU, you're saving back your gilt replacements, you're holding those pigs are shedding, and so it just made it more difficult to clean up. So those are a couple of key points. And then don't be alarmed by the fact that your pre-weaning mortality is coming down, but you're weaning pigs and they go out in the nursery or whatever and they start scouring. That's just part of the disease. There'll be a few animals that are still shedding. They'll spread it to the others. They'll go through it and they'll be fine. So that's just part of the process. Here's a couple slides we'll kind of touch on. This was some research that Dr. Mike Murtaugh at Minnesota conducted, and it was interesting for us and helps explain what's going on with how the sow's responding to this infection. So in this case, they had oral exposure, our normal oral exposure, and went back and looked at the different kinds of antibodies that respond from this exposure. And so IgA is the antibody response for an intestinal or mucosal exposure. And so that's the one that we're looking at with our feedback. This is peripheral blood. You can see there's not much difference there. And then minimal response in the spleen to build antibody response. So, you know, and the key part here goes along with this slide then is that as we look at, we're getting through the outbreak, sows are building an immunity, and so we're relying on the antibodies, the IgA antibodies in the milk that those pigs get every time they suckle to help prevent and keep down this virus. And so that's a key part of it. And if you're getting litters that are breaking, and we had more trouble probably with gilt litters, because we all know they don't have the same immune response that a sow has. So your whole idea in washing, disinfecting, everything you're doing is to reduce the viral load that the maternal antibodies or the antibodies that sow in the sow's milk will allow those pigs to get on through and get to weaning time. So some other tips that we've picked up along the way, batch farrowing has worked very well. We've had people move to batch farrowing. If you got every 4 weeks or whatever, it makes it a lot easier to clean up. You don't have sows in there farrowing every week. And so those breaks have really helped to get those herds back to normal production. And so we've even had some larger companies move to that. Our tech service group has put together a document. If you're interested in trying that, it is a process to move to it, and so we can help you with that. But that's worked really well. Dr. Joe Connor presented some information at the Lehman Conference, some tips that will be helpful in getting back to normal production. What they had come up with is that the idea of not even farrowing anything for 16 days. Keep all the pigs out of the farrowing rooms, and so they would either farrow them in gestation, euthanize the pigs because they're going to die anyway, or induce to farrow for 16 days, and then start on the 17th day. Then you can start load sows, get them to farrow, allow them to farrow in there. But the key point is that just only leave enough pigs to survive to your teat count. You cannot move any pigs off that sow. It comes back to that McRebel program. You don't want to move any pigs around, and so just euthanize down to your teat count and do that for 14 days. So you're 30 days out from the break, and then at that point you can start to foster pigs for the first 24 hours only. And these are small things, but they're really important and keep from spreading the virus around in those farrowing rooms. And so those are good tips. And then on the gestation side, what we noticed as we were going through these breaks is that we would have some higher return rate. The sows get really sick. And so comments were to increase your breeding target by 15% for 6 weeks. Go ahead and use up your gilt pool. If you do heat no serve, use those animals up to get your weekly mating target, and then breed sows that have at least lactated 7 days or longer. Go ahead and mate those, and then skip anything that's less than 7 days. Then just to everyone to realize, matrix from the FDA point of view is not legal to use in sows. So just be aware of that. Work with your herd veterinarian, but we shouldn't be doing that. A lot of discussion around the vaccines. I just got some new information today. So I think we've had some opportunity on vaccines. Harris Biologics was a product that was available last year. Both of these companies, their license is what they call a conditional license. They went out, proved safety with it, but there's not been a lot of studies done to prove efficacy. So the Harris product was available to us through the winter, and we started using it in the tail end of our cleanups just to try to boost immunity and help get those pigs, cut down on the diarrhea, and get through the elimination project. But that technology is called alpha vector, and so they just have to use the sequence of the virus, and they insert it in to make the product, and so it makes it easier. They don't have to grow the virus. It was very difficult to grow this PED virus, and so that took a bit of time. So their product has worked well. It has a shorter lifespan for a shelf life of just 42 days. It's a frozen product. But I did receive information today that they had sent me on email that they've tried the vaccine 2 doses in naive herds, and their research would say that 80% of the pigs survive after the 2 doses. So there might be an opportunity there. And then as well, the Zoetis product, that is a traditional killed vaccine virus. It's NVSL culture adapted, and their recommendations are as written here at 5 and 3 weeks pre-farrow, and then a booster every time sows farrow. So, and then because it's a killed product, they use 2 of their better adjuvants in the product to try to help stimulate immune response. But they're just now doing challenge studies, and so there'll probably be more information coming out, as we go forward here in the year. Then, if you do want to maintain a positive herd, the key part of it is to get exposure to your gilts going forward. And so in order to do that, you have to have distinct groups, all in, all out. It cannot be continuous flow because you'll just keep that virus in the environment. So have distinct groups, give them exposure around 60 pounds, and then allow 12 weeks to cool down after that exposure. So at least they've seen the virus before, and then you can monitor that either with PCR tests, either to be negative on oral fluids or fecal swabs. Just know where you're at. Then you can take them into the sow farm, get your boar exposure, and then, depending on the status of your sow herd, if you have those gilt litters breaking through and scouring, then my recommendation would be to go ahead and use the vaccine 7 to 10 days prior to farrow, and that should help build that antibody level and help those pigs get through to weaning time. Then, as Todd mentioned, we did bring in a group of nutritionists and veterinarians last fall for discussions of what did we as a breeding stock company need to do to get ready for this upcoming season. And so their feedback was that the nutritionists themselves said there was increased suspicion of the feed, looked at ingredient risk as a primary feed-based risk. And then their comments were that as they made diet changes and went away from the porcine animal proteins, that they had less breaks on the rations, and so that's been one of our recommendations. Then along the same line is University of Minnesota has done research with the PED virus and been able to show that the virus will die out in 2 weeks' time at room temperature. And so we've actually had some people working at, can you hold either whole complete feed, which is difficult, or at least your ingredients, some of your key ingredients, to be able to hold them for 2 weeks in a heated space. In the wintertime, the virus will survive longer because it likes the cold. So we've extended it out to 4 weeks, and then we've got a few feed mills and stuff that are either getting a dry van that you can heat, just storing their ingredients in the dry van. So those are just some ideas that you can try to use on the feed side. And then, you know, some of these products will be PCR positive, but they may not be infectious. The PCR test will tell us if the genetic material is there, but it does not tell you whether it's infectious or not. So if you're going to use PCR testing, then work it through with your management group of how you're going to handle that. We do know from some of the testing with minimal infectious dose from K-State that you're right down there on the cutoff line of 35 cycle times between positive and negative, and it can still be infectious. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Then we're trying to work more, and we've done feed mill audits with all the feed mills that supply our multiplication. And so some of the key steps that we all realize the high volume of ingredients. So we're trying to work with those mills to increase their biosecurity. Keeping your ingredient trailers separate from the outbound, and then controlling how people move around within the mill, not letting these ingredient drivers come through. Everybody wants to congregate in the office and have coffee and visit and everything. And Dr. Scott Dees, some of his research showed that they were picking up PCR positives on the floor in those offices. So we've recommended ingredient suppliers to put on the little booties when they get out of their tractor, or even have mill employees unload the loads, just trying to really restrict the movement within the feed mill. So those are just a few things to think about. And then two would be just the sequencing of diets. Do your sow diets first. If you can find a feed mill that, we've got some major ones in Iowa, they're just going to do sow diets only, or sequence sow rations ahead of some of the other finishing feed if you're using animal protein products. So those are just some other suggestions to keep in mind as we go forward. Then there has been a little bit of research done, and the formalin product that's been used in the poultry industry for a lot of years, either Salcurb from Chemin or the Terminate product for Antox, has an effect on the virus. And this is research that Kansas State's been working on with Dr. Steve Dreeds. His comment was that they do know that the formalin product will reduce it from 1 to 3 logs. So if you've got a low amount of virus, it should be helpful. Now, Scott Dees' research that he did with the Chemin product indicated that it totally killed the virus in a setting where they had seeded the feed. So that is a possibility. Be aware of additional cost on that, and so work through whether you want to have the cost or try to do a better job on the biosecurity side of it through testing and segregation of products and things like that. Our focus period here is the 1st of November through March. And so that's kind of what our whole push on our multiplication side, and we're trying to get everyone tuned up is the winter time is going to be the critical time. It'll probably vary on how bad the winter is, how much snow and ice we have. Those will all be factors as we go forward, but just kind of think of that in your mind if you want to take additional steps. Then too, this past summer, PIC participated in a trial with Iowa State with Dr. Darrell Holtkamp that had done research the year before looking at what it took from just strictly a heat point of view to inactivate the PED virus, and Iowa Select Farms helped us as well as Preserve International. We used the bioassay to be to tell us whether it was effective or not, because as I mentioned earlier, you could still be PCR positive, but it's an inactivated virus. And so part of our monitoring, we use PCRs to monitor the cleanliness of our trailers. And it was kind of frustrating because we would have a totally clean trailer and be PCR positive, and then what do you do? And so we wanted to determine, is it truly dead virus? And so our protocol, we use just cold water wash, detergent, and then we use Synergize at the label directions of 1/2 ounce per gallon, and then looked at various times and temperatures to see if the virus was inactivated. And then we also had a positive and negative control just to tell us that we had infectious virus we were working with. And so the good news is that all of the bioassays, no matter what the temperature was or time, were negative. The challenge here is that there's a lot of PCR positives. So I think we have to think about how we're going to handle that in our monitoring protocols, and so it's going to change our focus a little bit. This is a table of the temperatures, the times and temperatures. We did 155 degrees for 10 minutes, 150 for 10, 140 for 20, 120 for 20, and then we even did just an overnight dry. Room temperature 68 degrees for 12 hours, and then also looked at it of just wash, disinfect in 60 minutes contact time at room temperature. So all of those bioassays were negative. The disinfectants will work. The key part of it is you got to be clean. No organic material left. And so, and then by day 3 or 7, then your PCRs are going negative. So the key part of it is just be sure that you're doing the little details. Focus on clean, as I mentioned. Have someone inspect those trailers, really put emphasis there. Monitor your processes, record, log, have people logging so you can go back and review it. Monitor the disinfectant dilution rate. Be sure your concentrations are right so you're not missing anything. And then with truck washing, it's easy to be in a hurry. You got a lot of numbers to get through. And so be sure that people are putting the correct amount of disinfectant in water, or even monitor it by time, just to be sure 10 minutes, whatever, be sure that whole trailer gets covered with disinfectant. And then 2, with this virus, we know that people are fomites or big carriers, so we're putting more emphasis on the tractor cab, being sure it's clean, disinfecting the mats, and then having the drivers take biosecurity steps on farm. And so we're including the feed side, which historically we've only worried about the live haul. We're including the feed now as we go forward. Then these are some tips. This is from the Tech Service Production Group. And so if we look at this whole coronavirus situation, is just like a 3-legged stool. If you don't do all the parts right, you're going to have a wobbly stool and you may not be successful. So herd closure, reduce viral load, and then reduce the amount of internal spread. So those are the key points. The basics of this whole situation is what we've talked about. Load with your gilts, try to get as young as you can, give them exposure, and then no entries after that for 20 weeks. You're going to use the oral feedback, uniform exposure, just like we mentioned, and then the focus on reducing the viral load in the environment. So that washing, disinfecting, detergent, everything is all the barns. Includes gestation, the farrowing's obvious, even the level of wiping down the feed lines, get all the dust down because that virus is hanging around in those dust particles, on the fan shrouds, everywhere. So complete wash, disinfect, and then the wean down we talked about, no pigs in farrowing for 16 days, all in, all out, all the things that we covered here earlier. Strict McRebel, just like we talked about, no pig movements inside, segregate your staff, the farrowing gestation employees, and then actually your day 1 people, even in the farrowing rooms. No pig movements, change gloves and needles, and then everybody stays out of the crates. Then from an economic point of view or production side of it, here are the things to expect, and don't become alarmed by it. 16 to 20 weeks after the break, expect that you're going to have a drop in total born. As those sows are sick as they went through the break, your total born is going to drop a little. You will have an increased return rate for 1 to 4 weeks after the break, 2 to 4 times higher than normal. And then the same is true as you'll have an increase in abortions, anywhere from 2 to 5 times above your normal for 2 to 3 weeks. So those are just part of it. And probably the most difficult part, and Gonzalo will try to fire everybody up on the HR side of it, is it's really tough on employees. It's an ugly situation. And so be respectful of that, work with people to try to get through it. And if you do these steps and then focus on, have a plan, be ready to go. Some people are already doing what we call a fire drill. They've got their documentation. Here's what we're going to do. Just rehearse it so everybody understands what's going to be expected. Our hope is nobody will go through it, but be prepared because time is of the essence to get the exposure. So always, teamwork is critical. Stick to the plan. There'll be times and hiccups in there. What we would see is in that 8 to 10 week window after you've done your exposure, pigs are surviving, looks like things are really going good, and then you start moving pigs around. And then boom, here comes the pre-weaning mortality again, and the virus gets going. So stick to the plan, stick to the protocol, that's really essential.